Well, I'm Cyndi Murlock. My maiden name is Smith, and I was born in 1956 at a new hospital in our valley, Antelope Valley Hospital. It was the first year it was built, and I lived on 75th Street, and I was raised on 75th Street in the middle of all the orchards, the pear and the peach orchards. They surrounded us. Well, I grew up in a home where my father and my brother were both in prison. So I was the second child. And to me, it was very important that I had a life that was different than my mother's, who was working 4 jobs for us children. So when I was in high school, I had quite a few of my instructors had made comments how much that I seemed to like children. And so I decided to go to Alpine School because teaching, it was either we were going to be a teacher or I was going to be a nurse. That was our job choices as women, it seemed back then. So while I was in school, I went into a work experience program through Palmdale High School, and I went to school half day, and then the rest of the day I volunteered at Alpine School. And through the volunteering that year, when I turned 17, the district hired me on as an aide to work for the school district. So I worked there. Job-wise, I worked there, but I also worked at Farmers Market, which was right next door, because turning 18, I needed to be able to support myself, and I wanted to pay for my college education. So I attended AV college, and that was pretty unusual for a teen in Little Rock at that time, because most of us girls, the expectation was just get married, and we became housewives. And I did get married at 18, and I did not become a housewife. So I've worked since I was 18. I'm 61 now. I've worked for Keppel District all of those years in different jobs. I worked in the office as a secretary. I worked as an aide. Went on as a substitute, and then they hired me on as a teacher, and so now I'm retiring from that. And I worked in the packing sheds when I was in high school because, of course, my mom having to work so many jobs, we didn't have the money to, buy those cute clothes that us girls wanted in high school. So in the summertime, we could make really good money in those packing sheds. So I worked for Jack Bones, and in the packing shed that was up on 138 over by 77th Street. It's not there any longer. I worked there packing peaches, and then I also washed windows across the street at the Little Rock restaurant. I did that as a teenager until I was hired on in the school district. So it was really awesome because our orchard owners in Little Rock always hired the teenagers that were raised in Little Rock. Our farm workers were hired only for inside the orchards, and we were hired always for in the packing sheds. So it really helped the kids in Little Rock a lot. I wouldn't want to even tell you the things we did in those packing sheds. Probably the owners wouldn't want to know and hear about their losses as we had peach fights and pear fights in those packing sheds. But yeah, we had a lot of good times. The sprinklers were always running in the orchards, and so we could run barefoot through those orchards on those metal sprinklers and get soaking wet on our way back home. So we had a lot of fun. All of my china is peaches and pears. I'm very sentimental, and we have like fruit trees in the back and stuff for that. It was really nice because we had our own bus system, which Keppel is now going to this next year. When I was a little girl, we housed the buses behind Alpine School, and we had our own bus system. So all of us kids knew each other in Little Rock because we all rode 1 or 2 buses at that time. And if we didn't ride the bus, we rode our bikes down through the orchards to get through school, or we ran along the highway to get to school. We didn't really have any concerns at all about strangers or other issues that the children have right now. In Little Rock, we didn't have that. When I first started teaching, Alpine was a kindergarten through 3rd grade school, and Antelope was built. It was the 4th through 6th grade, and Almondale, which is now called Keppel Academy, was our 7th and 8th grade. So they did some adjustments that year, and the year I was hired, they asked me to bring the 3rd grade over to Antelope School. So unlike what our teachers have now, they have 3 days that they can arrange their classrooms, and they get all the supplies delivered by maintenance. I had to go to Alpine, go get all of my books from all the different classrooms, set up my classroom, and it was then the first 3rd grade classroom that was over at Antelope School. So that's how I began. And so I pretty much remained a 3rd grade teacher for quite a few years. The principal, our new principal that was being hired, Mr. Pospisil, he was opening up Pearblossom School. It was just built. So myself, Jean Kirby, and Kathy Behan helped him and the designer design that school. So we helped set up how the playgrounds would look. We each had a wing, our own wing, and we ordered all the supplies for all of the teachers, and it was really kind of groundbreaking in the district. It was their new school. So that was really exciting, and that year I moved into 1st grade and became really truly a reading teacher, and that's what my specialty is in, is reading. I worked 10 years as a coach, an instructional coach in our district. So I worked at all of the school sites that we have. We have Alpine, Antelope, Keppel Academy, Pearblossom, Lake LA, and Daisy Gibson. So I was assigned throughout those 10 years to work at those different school sites to instruct teachers on best teaching strategies. And that's all I did then for those years. And it was under our Reading First program, which was a national program, federally funded through our school district. Then after that, they decided that coaches were no longer needed, which was quite controversial. And so I went back into the classroom. And so I've taught 3 years since then as a 2nd grade teacher in my 2nd grade classroom that I was a 2nd grader in at Alpine. So that's been really neat, because I still got to have the old-fashioned paint trays that are in there that are all metal lined. All of the old closets and everything are still in that room. So that's really exciting. We had wonderful rain that would come down in Little Rock, and the dam would have to release the water down through Little Rock Creek. So all of us kids, we loved to go down to the creek. The water would rush through and actually washed out the bridge a few times. That's how fast it would go. We could hear and feel the boulders moving down the creek because I live next to the creek. All of the kids, we would get together and we would ride our bikes along the along the edge of the creek like little daredevils. I don't know how none of us drowned in that creek, but we would do that every summer, and the kids in Little Rock don't have that now because of the drought. But we always had a creek running all the time, and so that's one of my favorite memories. The most rewarding things in my teaching career always come from the students. And one of the things that happened when I was an instructional coach out at Daisy Gibson, the principal brought a letter in to me, and it was from Darren Hunter, and he was a student of mine in 1st grade at Pearblossom School. Well, he'd grown up and he had been at West Point, and he had written this letter and said he was sitting there quietly and pondering how did he get there from growing up in Little Rock. And he said, I just remember you, Mrs. Murlock, always telling me and the rest of the class that you believed in us and we could be whoever we chose to be in life. It was our decision. And so that was a really wonderful thing. So it's things of students. I've had a brother from an 8th grader that graduated. He graduated 2 years ago from Alpine, and at the promotion, the brother came up to me and thanked me because his younger brother had changed his life that year. And he told me, it's because you believed in him. Now, I was a 2nd grade teacher, but I'm also the teaching assistant principal at Alpine. So I regularly had 7th and 8th graders come into my classroom, and I would counsel them. And this young man went from being in an office every day to once a week to the last half of the year, he was not in the office at all anymore. And he just really valued himself more. So those are the things that as a teacher I can only say that it's always from the students. Those are my rewards. Well, I feel that growing up, when I grew up in Little Rock, that was a very special place. The town was full of orchards, peach and pear orchards. Everybody knew each other. So all of the families that were in Little Rock, we could stop by. If we needed a drink of water, I could stop by someone's house and tell them I was thirsty and get a drink of water. That's a real change. There's not that, I don't know if it's family connectedness, but because the community's larger, it's caused that. It doesn't have that tight-knit community feel. The other thing is just that growing up myself in Little Rock, there was such a low expectation of education for the kids. So for us to complete high school, and I was the first high school graduate in my family. So for us to complete high school, that was really something that was to be very proud of. And I feel that in the community of Little Rock now that the expectation is much higher, that our parents have struggled themselves and have come from the demographics are lower, and so they want more for their child. When I talk to parents that are in my classroom, their expectations are like mine for their children, is they expect them to either go into college or to go into a trade school, but not to have to struggle as much as they have. And so I think that's important to see that in our community and to really praise the parents in our community for that. Being an educator coming out of Little Rock, I would like to see that the parents are more involved with Alpine School, that it becomes the hub of the community where there are perhaps community gardens that are going on, that there's parent training for parents, because I've had many, many parents ask me privately to teach them parenting skills. I had a lady come to me from the Sun Village community, and she asked me to come to Jackie Robinson and to show them how to do gardening. So I just feel like the school years ago was the hub, it was the center of the community, and it's not that anymore. And I feel that part of it is the educators' fault, to tell you the truth. I think educators and administrators need to reach out to our parents, because it's not that parents don't want to do that. I think they don't know how to do it. And so to me, if anything, for myself personally, that I would want to see in a community is anything that reaches out to parents so that they become part of their child's life that is going on all day long. That's what I'd like to see. I really want to take the time to work with community leaders like yourself and Janet Flores, who is our community liaison. My husband and I, we have a wildlife garden here, so we are very focused on this right now, and part of it is because we want to have this as a contribution for the community also. And so that's what keeps us here. We love the people. This is where we both grew up. The biggest surprise to me has been the tremendous change in the businesses. But then I understand those changes because we were the fruit basket, and Little Rock is no longer that fruit basket. So that's just going to happen naturally. And now the businesses are more based on the consumer that's there. We have a lot of restaurants that are there, versus when I was a child, it was more of our fruit and packing and exporting that out of the valley into other areas. So that's what I see as the biggest change. And it's a sad change for me because I grew up as a child in the middle of orchards and greenery and fruit, and we could pick fruit up off and eat it, whatever we wanted, to see that that's not there now. But then there's a blessing to what's there for the community also, and it serves the community's need at this time. So I think the change has to happen, even though it's kind of surprising as I look back. Little Rock has the best kids in the world. I've worked at all of the schools in our district, and the children in Little Rock are just the most loving, giving children ever. And along with the demographics that Alpine serves in the community, that we have children that don't take things for granted at all. And that's evident daily in the classroom. So that's what I would say. And Robin, I'm telling you, it's so true.